When a friend of mine asked me to help him realize its graduation project from its electronic high school, I decided that it was finally time to build something I wanted to build from a long time. So, first thing we are gonna need is a Raspberry Pi Model A+. This little kit sold by a German website called hwairsoft.de, and finally this Arcade enclosure for the iPad mini, which is a tablet of which I have never acknowledged the existence. Why? Because if it's under 9 inches, it ain't for me. So what we're gonna do, and it probably has been spoiled by the title of this video, we're gonna take all the electronics out of this device, replace it with the Raspberry Pi and the German kit, and make our own portable mini arcade retro gaming cabinet. So stay tuned. We'll be back after the opening credits. First, we'll need to buy the components for our cabinet. The enclosure, as said before, will have to be the one from the Xeon Tech Arcadie iPad mini dock, which is available on Amazon for less than $20 right now. It has to be the one for the iPad mini. The one made for the iPhone is too small for all components to fit inside. There's even a variation made for the Kindle Fire named, guess what? The Kindle Fire! But I don't know if it could work, since I can just ask someone who has it, would you kindly break it down and see if 2 circuit board and an LCD screen can fit in, please? For what concerns the Raspberry Pi instead, there are currently 5 models, but I keep popping out like mushroom, so by the time you'll be watching this, I expect to be even more Pis out there. But for now, we have 3 generations of Pis divided between a premium and an economic model. Basically, the Ace models are small, without Ethernet or too many USBs, probably to be stuffed more easily into Pi powered devices. Yeah, like the one we are making right now. And controlled through the GPIO pins. The B models, including the new Raspberry 2, which exists only as a B model for now, are instead more powerful and have more connection ports. The first generation of Pi had a 26-pin GPIO connector and a jack audio port separated from the coaxial video port, meaning that it had to be used with the original version of this kit. But since the second generation, or first plus generation if you prefer, introduced the 40 pins GPIO connector and this new port which transmits both an audio and a video signal, basically a composite jack port, if that's even a thing. Because of this, now there are 2 versions of this kit. The first compatible with the first generation Pi, and the second compatible with all the others. But which Pi should you go for? The first generation Pi will be easier to fit into the Arcadie. Yep, even easier than the A+, which I am using, which is the smaller Pi overall. But the newer Pis, especially the P2, are more powerful, and any game emulated on it will run a lot more smoothly. Speaking about the kits, there are actually 4, since when you're buying one, you are presented with many options. The most important are: which Pi model are you buying the kit for, and which LCD panel do you want with it. And then there are less important options, like if you want to buy an SD card with an operating system pre-installed, or if you want to buy the kit without an LCD panel at all. I'll address these 2 immediately. If you are not an expert with this stuff, just pick one of the 2 panels. Finding another compatible one on your own It's not very easy when you have no idea what you're dealing with, and the chances are you won't be able to land a better deal anyway. For what concerns the SD card, it doesn't really take that long to burn an image to your own 8GB SD card, so you're calm, mate. So we were remaining with 4 different kits depending on your combination of your Pi and your selected panel. On the HW Airsoft website you will see some photos from the building process of a kit for the first generation Pi with a 5.6 inches panel. I instead went with a second generation kit with the 4.3 inches panel. In the box you will find the SD card if you decide to buy the one included with the kit, the power supply board, a bunch of electronic mambo jumbo including a speaker, a ribbon cable and some buttons. Then new labels for your cabinet since you'll have to peel off the original ones, and finally the SD panel with its own electric control board. Finally we need the right tools, namely a Phillips screwdriver, a solder with soldering iron, something which you can use to drill a hole through plastic, and optionally an anti-static mat. The first step will be to tear the Arcadie apart, beginning by removing the 2 screws hidden under the labels at the sides of the cabinet, since it's not advisable to use water now that there are still electronic components inside the cabinet. So for now just use your bare hands. Once you have removed these 2 screws, which by the way you'll need later, so put them somewhere safe, you can now separate the back part from the front. There is still a lightning cable connecting the 2, but you can fix that by removing 2 more screws. More easy to locate this time. These 2 screws will never be needed again, so you can throw them away if you want to. At this point there are 2 separate pieces to take care of. For what concerns the back, remove the 6 screws and put them somewhere safe. Open the back into 2 more parts, take the 6 springs and the button springs cover things and throw all of them away. You'll have no need for them. Now back to the front. Remove the first 2 screws, put them somewhere safe and separate the control board from the front chassis. This control board is made of 2 separate plastic boards, each holding a circuit board. Basically, a capacitive touch screen works like this. You touch the screen and the static electricity in your finger is sensed by the device. In this case we have 6 rubber buttons pushing the surface of the screen if you were to insert an iPad mini into the dock. Internally there are 6 round metallic things to which electricity flows from after the first board gives the input to. Since our cabinet won't have any touchscreen, we can separate this board entirely just by removing the screws on the top, desoldering the wires and just pushing out. The wires, the lighting port, the board with the round things and the screw which was on the top can even be thrown away now. At this point we should have 4 different parts: the back, the middle, the front and the controls board. Even by scratching and using any sharp object we can find that there should still be some residue of the labels. To remove them completely we'll need to use something else. The electronics could be damaged in said process, so let's unscrew the circuit board from the plastic board, put the screws and the springs somewhere safe and throw all the plastic components into a sink. Now this is really important. You can actually separate the upper part of the front part by unscrewing 2 more screws, but that's not really necessary, since the only mechanical thing up there that could get damaged will be the screws, and it's not really likely. Now you can use water, soap or olive oil, but from my experience only gasoline will get the work done. The next step will take place while the cabinet is drying, since you're supposed to wash it with tons of soap after cleaning it with gasoline, unless of course you have a fetish for the smell of gasoline. Basically, you have to take the control circuit board and solder it to a ribbon cable, which you will find in the kit box. Now, the photo on the website misguided me at first, so I'll tell you what I did after doing it wrong the first few times. At the center of the board there is an hole for the ground wires, which are both the purple and the black wires. Both are to be soldered there. It is important to notice that the soldering iron, once melted with the solder, has to be placed on the green side of the board, not on the orange side. As for the other wires, you will see some empty holes on the board with the letters next to them. A and B stand for the A and B buttons, which you see in many cabinets. And there you'll have to solder respectively the green and the brown wires. Then you'll find the U, D, R and L, which stand for up, down, right and left. And they have to be soldered as follows: yellow wire to up hole, blue wire to down hole, red wire to right hole and orange wire to left hole. Take your time to ensure that all wires are soldered properly. If you see that the soldered iron looks too burnt and not of a silverish grey, then remove it and solder it again. It happens with cheap solders like mine, which I bought for $10, and it will cause you problems later on. So take your time now, or you'll have to open it back to fix it later. Once the plastic part of the control board has dried up, it's time to put it back together. The crucial part are the springs. For the buttons, you will see that on the circuit board there are two small components which have a tiny red switch on. Align the spring with the switches on the circuit board and with the center pillar of the button on the plastic board. For the stick, instead you'll have to align the spring with the black rubber circle thing and with the circle base of the stick. You have to do this properly or the spring will get stuck and it won't work properly. Trust me, I had to open it again 2 times to fix it. Once the springs are in position, use the screws to fix them there. Finally, from the kits box, you should find the 3 buttons, 2 bigger ones and a smaller one. At the same time, look for 3 identical connectors. There will be a black and a brown wire for each connector. You have to solder each of these 3 connectors to each of the 3 buttons. There is no mandatory direction in which they have to be soldered, but once again be sure to have soldered them properly. For the next step you should use a drill. I've been told you could use the solder if you are brave enough, but you will do a poor job and possibly get ill by breathing melted plastic. But it's your health, so your call, mate. And you need some tape as well, of course. The easier part is the front. Just drill 2 holes on the front and insert the 2 bigger buttons into them. Wait till you're done to mount the control board back, since the vibrations for the drill might damage the circuit board otherwise. Now there are 2 more parts remaining. This was a tricky part for me. I used the picture on the German website as a guide. Unfortunately, as I said before, they were made for the 1st Gen Pi and the 5.6 inches panel, so making the same holes didn't work for me. For this reason, you might want to figure out yourself where to do them instead of blindly following someone else's example like I did. Let's deal with each of them at a time. We'll begin with the middle part. Here what you want to do is to place the screen, the loudspeaker and the small speakers on one side, the one which will face the front, and the circuit board which manages the screen, will have to be placed on the other side instead. The side which has this plastic thing up here to keep the plastic holding mechanism thing in place. To make this work, you will need a big round hole down here to place the loudspeaker, and it has to be roughly the same size of the actual speaker, which is actually round, while the plastic square around it is for protection and to fix it in place more easily. So you'll need a roundish hole for it. Then we need another hole, this time more of the size of a rectangle. Through this hole we need to place the connector which connects the screen to the board. At first I thought I could place the screen on the right side of the cabinet, but eventually I realized that it had to be positioned exactly at the center. And this is very important since the form of the connector which connects them forces you to place the screen and the board back to back. So take your time to figure out the ideal position. At this point, on the top of the screen, drill an hole for the two speakers, which are actually both mounted on a single board. Finally, an hole in the lower part will let you make the connector for the controls in the front pass through. Now to back. If the middle was tough, this was insane. Basically, you have to place both the power supply board and the Pi in here. On the website you will find the instruction for the first gen Pi, which as I have mentioned were much easier. Basically, both the audio jack and the GPIO connectors were on the same side, so you could just align them like this. But on the newer Pis, the GPIOs and the jacks are on opposite sides, and because of the length of the Weibo connector, you have to place Pi and power supply side to side. But then you have to connect a jack cable on one side and many power connectors on the others of this double board, which is insane. Why? Because even after removing the 4 now useless cylinder plastic things, then you will still have little room in there to place all this stuff. Even because the Pi has to be next to a side to let you cut an hole to easily replace the SD card without having to tear it apart each time. So basically what you have to do is cut 2 small holes for the power port and tear the smaller button. Find the best position for power board and Pi, and finally cut an hole to easily swap the Pi's SD card. Once you have figured out where to cut this stuff, just place what you have to there. And of course use the duct tape to fix everything in position once you're done. Now it's time to connect all together. If you didn't before, reconnect the screen board and small speakers together. Then connect the control board ribbon cable, the loudspeaker, the buttons, cables, the supply port cable and the screen board cable to the power board. Then connect the jack connector of the power board to the Pi and the coaxial connector to the screen board. Before you decide to go fetch the screws you stored before, take a couple of minutes to do a test run. If you didn't get a pre-burned SD card, here's what you have to do. Take a 8GB SD card, be sure to back up everything that you add on it, since you need to format it. Then download the ISO image from the German website, 10 Win32 disk image, select the image file, put the code into the PC, then select it in the software, finally press write, and if prompted to say OK or whatever to go on. Fetch a 12 volt at 1 ampere power supply and connect it to the power port. The best way to test it is to go consoles PS1, then the controls setting where you can assign the controls here by pressing the coin button, which should be the lower front button if you connected it correctly. You can now switch the default buttons, so you can test each one of the 5 buttons and each of the 4 directions of the stick. If a button or a direction of the stick is not recognized, you may want to fix the way its wires have been soldered. If many or all of the buttons on the control board don't work, probably the purple and the black wires were not soldered properly. Once you have ensured that everything is working properly, it's time to put everything back together. Go fetch the screws. First screw the control board back if you didn't already. Then you have to put the middle and the back part back together. It is important that you put the black small round things back and the big white mechanism when you do this. I was not able to put back the lower ones since one got damaged while I was opening it, so I had to use duct tape instead. If you manage to get all of them back in position, it will be easier for you to mount it back into the front part. Otherwise you'll have to put them back in a less comfortable way, like using duct tape like I did. So now time to play. To get games on it you'll need a Linux based operating system, and no, OS X doesn't do it unless you use some third-party software maybe. On Windows, I try to no avail to do it with third-party softwares. I instead did as follow. Download Ubuntu or another Linux distribution. I used Fedora. Do a live CD or a live USB drive. Get the rooms of the game you want to play. If you are violating the law or not, it's something for you to care about. I am not priest, lawyer or officer of the law, so I just don't give a crap about the way you get your ROMs. Then copy the ROMs on a USB stick, boot up a PC from the live device or just boot up a device with Linux actually installed on it, and copy the ROMs in the right folders. Now turn on the PiCade, navigate through the menu by using the stick and the lower coin button, select emulator like NES, then the game like a Super Mario Bros, and finally play it. So that's it guys, now we finally have our own personal mini arcade cabinet where to play retro emulated games on. So that's all for my tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you will try to do something similar on your own, but I must advise you, as an amateur you might be able to do some of this stuff, but I end with a poor result. As a matter of fact, I studied electronics for 3 years, so I am supposed to know how to solder a circuit board, but the analog here is not exactly working properly. But anyway, it's still something. But if you can get help from someone more experienced than you, I advise you to take that help. But anyway, it's still nice to have this little thing here to play. So that's all for my tutorial, and see you next time.